Hello and welcome to another episode of Create the Edge. And we are really honored and humbled to have on board with us AJ and Ida, who are our guest speakers for today from Malaysia. I'll let Joy sort of go into a little bit more and explain and introduce them to you.
Thank you so much. Let me introduce the fair lady, Ida Hanin. Ida is a passionate in guiding others to build self-mastery. And we know that. Some of us, like AJ and myself, who interact with Ida, we know how much of mastery she does pass on to us. Coupled with self-mastery is EQ, and she does all of this by disrupting the mindset with psychosomatic and mindfulness practices. And here's to my friend and brother man, Dr. AJ Minai, popularly known as AJ. He's a digital storyteller whose passion is to empower professionals and brands with what he calls the millennials times digital equation to leadership, management, and brand engagement. So without further ado, here's Ida and AJ. Ida, a question for you. From a holistic self-awareness perspective, how can one understand and use emotional intelligence to create the edge for oneself and for one's organization?
Self-mastery. Well, that's a keyword that I love to use all the time because I was searching for self-mastery or that particular word for many, many years. As somebody from corporate, and I've been working with people, like hundreds and thousands of people in my corporate work before, 20 plus years ago. I never actually understood the meaning of self-mastery and what it can do to an individual in an organization from personal and professional perspective, as well as how it benefited the organization on a whole. And how can you use self-mastery actually to create the edge? And as far as I've come to this state now, what I see and what I understand much better now, if people have that self-mastery, that self-awareness, that self-conviction, and that self-confidence, they would definitely be able to thrive through the edge. Because living in the edge, to me, is the best. As long as you're in comfort zone, you have a safety net, an individual won't move. So you just imagine you have this one individual, and you have two individuals, and you have many individuals, and hundreds and thousands of them in your organization. But they are not moving because they're just so comfortable. They're not inspired. They're not empowered. So what would you think would impact the organization as a whole and their survival as well? So it starts with a person to have that in-depth awareness and mastery of self in order for them to be able to lead themselves, then lead another person, and lead a group, lead a team, lead an organization. Because when you have mastery, as a person, as a team, as an organization, you'll be able to survive and thrive and create that edge because you have that confidence. You master it. You know what you want. You do not know what you know what you want, and you know what you do not want to. So, and you're more mindful. You have the EQ level whereby you can actually prosper and use it in yourself, for yourself, and for other people. I just want to give one example. A good friend of mine, a very successful corporate individual, have been so well treated in her career, in her working life. And the last couple of weeks, she was just thrown away or probably just struck by something that happened to her in her organization. And she couldn't survive it. She couldn't thrive it. And she's breaking down and she says she's so much pain. And when I see it as an outsider, as her friend, I would say, hey, if you can get through that, you're going to build yourself another level. You'll be able to create totally new you that disrupt your own mindset, that disrupt your own behavior, that disrupt your own belief system. And that would, at the end of the day, help you have that mastery that a lot of people talk about, but they don't understand what people talk about.
Yeah, I think thank you, Ida. That's the sometimes, like AJ mentioned as he was explaining earlier about Disrupticon, sometimes the words become jargons and we use it in everyday vocabulary, but we really do not understand what the implication and the impact is. The example you've given is a beautiful, like as you were talking about the self-mastery, the word that came into mind was swag. You know, guys, we use this, you've got swag.
Yeah,
You know, what is
absolutely.
swag? Swag is a slang for confidence or bravado. I mean, here's a Gen X talking with a millennial. In my generation, we'd call it bravado and confidence. In AJ's
Yeah, we call it,
generation, we call it swag. So
yeah, totally.
that's where it's
Swag.
at. But great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. The question that I'll bring in for AJ is, disruption is sweeping, you know, across industry. And as Ida mentioned, back then, probably we'd call it challenging the status quo or pushing the envelope, so to speak. But it requires, disruption today requires businesses to adapt and pivot. So, and from your angle, what I love about your tag is that there's a Disrupticon name and tag attached to AJ, you know? I mean, you're all about disruption. So how, can you give us an idea how Disrupticon is?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Joy. I think probably the first thing I wanted to bring into context here is I wanted to start off by thanking Joy and Yusuf for inviting me and Ida on board. It was really, really nice of you guys, and it's a privilege being here. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. And
Thank you.
second is that we live in a very, very interesting time. We live in a time where disruption is being thrown around as a buzzword all the time. And quite frankly, nobody really knows how to drive any ROI out of disruption. You know, 5 years ago, I was sitting in front of one of the most powerful CEOs here in Malaysia that was managing a regional office of over 22,000 people. And, you know, he was telling me about, and I posted about this briefly yesterday on LinkedIn. I talked about how the same CEO was talking about how he felt storytelling, a lot of things that Ida just mentioned, emotional intelligence, self-mastery, all that is kind of fluff, you know. That was the term that he used. He said it's a lot of fluff, AJ, you know. I mean, influence building and all that, I don't have time for that, AJ. I have a business to run. That was the exact words that he used. And I said, that's interesting, because in my mind as a millennial, that is the number one thing that a leader should be doing: influence to inspire, right? But for some reason, the narrative has switched, and, you know, oddly enough, that person isn't the CEO anymore for that organization. Someone else has taken over, but the PA has stayed the same. So the last time 5 years ago, the PA who contacted me for the appointment is the same one who got in touch with me recently and asked me to come on over to meet the new CEO and to talk about how we can leverage disruption. And it's interesting how organizations as a entire landscape are changing. Disrupticon came about for one reason alone, guys. I just got tired of having to justify myself and millennials and Gen Z over and over again to the other generations. It came to a point where I used to open up the LinkedIn feed and I used to see a lot of Gen X rhetoric, about, oh, how millennials aren't very loyal, how millennials don't seem to have the leadership initiatives that we want, how, you know, the list went on. And interestingly, this created a sort of a backlash where a lot of the millennials ended up, you know, talking about Gen X and baby boomers and, you know, the traditionalists in a very, very negative light as well. And I was thinking, you know what, maybe these categorizations, Gen X, Y, Z, and all that stuff, maybe these categorizations are not that productive at all. Maybe we should talk about something new that I call the millennial times digital equation. And particularly, I call it Disrupticon. And I was thinking, you know what, maybe these categorizations, Gen X, Y, Z, and all that stuff, maybe these categorizations are not that productive at all. Maybe we should talk about something new that I call the millennial times digital equation. And particularly, I call it Disrupticon because it represents one unified generation. And where am I coming from? I'm coming from not just a generation that I describe as Generation C. I call it C for connected, because I know a 75-year-old guy right now who is much more of a digital native than a 13-year-old in school who does not know what LinkedIn is yet, despite being called a digital native. So we live in a world of a lot of labels that don't quite make sense. You know what I mean? So I'm challenging that status quo with a new term called Disrupticon, which is a framework. And it's a framework that will add to the bottom line of every organization by a program that we've developed as a team. And that program is a 3-day program. Day 1, you talk about self-mastery, which Ida has touched upon briefly right now. Day 2, you talk about how can you take that mindset, that disruptive mindset that you've embraced in day 1, and how can you start proliferating it within the organization to more people, to more champions, right? So you start elevating the entire organization internally, right? And then step 3, which is day 3, it talks about how can you take that to the marketplace? How can then your organization create that perception that it is truly creating the edge through disruption, right? So that's a very succinct way of ideally defining what Disrupticon means. It's about creating some tangibility to this concept that CEO has been talking about or describing as fluff for the longest time.
The program that AJ just described is a 3-day program. Disrupt Yourself is going to be led and delivered by Ida. Disrupt the organization is going to be led and delivered by AJ himself. And Disrupt the Marketplace is going to be done by yours truly. And we're taking disruption to the generations at the workplace, to the marketplace, and IDA's assisting in creating individuals to understand what the self-mastery is all about. You know, how do you disrupt yourself?
No, that's absolutely fantastic. And, you know, it was really lovely listening to both you, Ida and AJ, because I love the fact that what you said, Ida, regarding it's so important to actually start with yourself, because that's where any kind of change, any kind of transformation actually comes through, so to speak, which brings it very well to what AJ said, which I absolutely loved. I mean, I love the Transformers thing, you know, Disrupticon. That is absolutely fantastic. So
I grew up with Optimus Prime.
Yeah. But there you go. So
we all do.
So hail Optimus Prime. So
yeah,
absolutely. So I think that is absolutely fantastic, especially with the connected generation sort of analogy that you brought on, and that is so important. And I think that's where so many businesses actually lose sight of their actual target audience, because they're trying to confine their message into specific you know, thought streams rather than, you know, having some sort of a message which is more widely prevalent and more widely acceptable. And that's the thing. So, you know, we need to embrace that. You know, it's Generation C. I loved it, absolutely. So Generation Connected. So can you tell us something, AJ, that we wouldn't guess about you?
This is probably going to be very embarrassing, because I haven't shared this with anybody. Only my closest buddies, like literally people who really know me very well.
We are
probably know about this, but because I want to do right by the conversation, I want to do right by #CreateTheEdge, and because I'm such a big fan of both of you and Ida, right? I'm gonna come out and say it. So a lot of people don't know that between the ages of probably about somewhere between 19 to about 24, I was a male model. And
I know that, AJ. I know that.
Yeah.
I saw that in a magazine. I mean, I did see the magazine.
Okay, so Ida probably found some dirt on me, but a lot of people on LinkedIn don't know that.
Awesome.
I was 19 to about 24. I would do a lot of primarily not so much print modeling, but more so catwalk shows and stuff like that. And yeah, it was a very interesting time in my life. I was working full time, but at the same time, the evenings I would go and hang out and do shoots. It was great money on the side. But I think there were other lessons that I learned in that industry that definitely changed my perspective on a lot of things. So I won't go into too much of detail. I'd like to keep some mystery on that, right, Yusuf?
Yeah.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
But that's something that I think a lot of viewers probably wouldn't know.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, AJ. And similar question to you, Ida. You know, tell us something about yourself which we would normally not be able to guess.
Okay, now to take a deep breath. We are on the topic of disruption, right? And creating the edge. And I've actually all my life I've always been living on the edge. So I just want to go back. Recently, I was with a group of my seniors from USM. We did a video gig for the university, and after the gig, we were talking and we were discussing, and it brought me back to the time when I was in uni. I was in matriculation then. I was like 18 years old, and well, this is tough. It's like being a lady is not easy, and in a way that you get harassed all the time or most of the time. And yeah, I was harassed by my lecturer. So and I told my friends and I told my seniors, and they say, hey, you should start that hashtag me too. And I said, look, well, but that was in the past. But yeah, so, but now again, I think that was why it brought me into this self-mastery journey as well. So basically, how do I strive going through that challenge of going through the situation? And I'm pretty much on top of it now. So I don't really talk about it at all because some people may not like it. But yeah, one of the guy who was editor in one of the broadcasting, he said that, if you come out, I'm going to take you to the studio, my studio, and you're going to put your hair down there, like, like the movie where you can't see your face. And then you're going to tell people what you experienced. And then, you know what? Ambika will be on your side and fight for you all the way out. So that is something that I don't tell. And I don't know whether it's suitable here, but basically, yeah, self-mastery does help you a lot to actually go beyond that and forget, forgive, and move on.
Thank you so much for sharing this, Ida. I mean, that's a very vulnerable moment that you did share with us, and we appreciate that. So, just to very quickly wrap it up, I think we've had a fantastic conversation, which was what we were intending to do regarding how we can actually sort of make sure that we can master our mindset, so to speak, to embrace transformation and disruptions that are going around us or happening around us at this present moment. So thank you very much for your time. We do appreciate if you will kindly provide your comments and feedback below, and please let us know how we might be able to make this interview and guest series and create the edge better by giving us some insights and your suggestions regarding who you would like to have on the show and what industries you would like us to focus on. So thank you once again, Ida and AJ and Joy. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you once again.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you so much, AJ. Thank you, Ida.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.